Welcome to the Engineering with Nature podcast. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has been working on the Engineering with Nature initiative since 2010, working and collaborating to advance the use of natural processes and systems to deliver a broad range of economic, environmental, and social benefits. EWN develops and implements nature-based solutions for water and infrastructure projects. It brings together a growing international community of practitioners, scientists, engineers, and researchers to harness the power of nature to innovate and solve problems and create sustainable solutions. This podcast tells their stories. Now here's your host, Sarah Thorne of Decision Partners.
How do we measure what is important to us? And how do we translate those values into decisions about infrastructure projects so that they can deliver the broadest set of economic, environmental, and social benefits? That's the focus of our conversation today. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 4. I'm here with Todd Bridges, Senior Research Scientist for Environmental Science with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the National Lead of the Engineering with Nature program. We are really pleased to welcome back Justin Aaronworth, who's President and CEO of the Water Institute of the Gulf. Justin, welcome back to talk about measuring what matters.
Great to be with you.
Justin joined us in Season 3, Episode 2, which aired in October 2021, where we talked about defining the benefits and costs of nature-based solutions as a lever for encouraging adoption by all kinds of organizations. I think it'd be an understatement to say that a lot of work has gone on over the past year or so. Todd, maybe you could put that into perspective for us.
Yeah, the last year or so, maybe the last few decades. But, there's really a great opportunity before us. It includes some challenges, but it's all focused on measuring what is truly important. And you can think of this as a three-legged stool, and this being the third leg. But as we've mentioned on a previous episode of the podcast, on Earth Day 2022, President Biden issued an executive order 14072. And part of that executive order directed the federal government to submit a report to the people, and it was also submitted in COP27, focused on identifying opportunities to accelerate the deployment of nature-based solutions across the federal government. And it included policy and guidance and program changes. And we had an episode of the podcast with Heather Tallis and Lydia Olander, two of the co-chairs of the White House report on opportunities to accelerate nature-based solutions that was issued just a few weeks ago. And within that report, we have this focus on accelerating the use of these approaches. That would be one leg. But a second leg of this stool is assessing and understanding the value of nature. And we've also spoken with Heather Tallis on another podcast episode about this process related to the National Nature Assessment. And we are in the process within that assessment of collecting information from people and organizations across America about what nature means to them and how they value it, so that we can take that understanding into our process of assessing and in the future managing nature. And then the third leg of the stool is measurement. So how do we acknowledge, recognize, evaluate, and incorporate the suite of benefits that nature can provide as a part of infrastructure projects? How do we measure? How do we document? How do we incorporate the value of nature-based solutions within those projects? That's what we've been working on with Justin and his colleagues at the Water Institute of the Gulf for the last 2 years, and it's a hugely important undertaking.
Indeed. And the work is really, really impressive. I had the opportunity to virtually attend the recent Measuring What Matters Summit in Washington, D.C., and I was so impressed by the very keen interest and the knowledge and the engagement of all of the participants.
We're still experiencing the warm glow of the event, if you will. But, with that, with that caveat in mind, if I reflect on what I can remember of the hundreds of meetings or workshops or summits that I've participated in over my 30 years within the federal government, I think this event was the most impactful, the most special, where the Engineering with Nature program partnered with the Water Institute and the Resilient America program within the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine to hold this event and draw together people from a broad range of organizations and perspectives, stakeholders in this process of valuing nature. And they represented themselves so well, those who participated in me. They were so eloquent and moving in how they contributed their understanding to this enterprise that we're engaged in, and understanding the array of benefits that nature-based solutions can offer. And we're going to be cogitating and drawing from what was said and the interactions we had at this meeting for some time, for sure.
Well, I very much agree with Todd's comments, and I will say that I think it's a great tribute to the work and to the summit to hear Todd reference his 30 years with the Corps, and I'm sure there are many, many, many meetings. So that I think is extraordinarily high praise, and all of us who participated, I think, continue to feel that buzz and that glow. It was more successful than we could have imagined. We had over 1,000 people participating, over 100 with us in person, and over 900 online, which again exceeded all of our expectations for the summit. And we were so pleased to see how deeply the topic resonated with such a broad array of people from all levels of government, from the private sector, nonprofits, and so many other stakeholders. And it was an opportunity not only for those of us who organized the event to share information, but to listen and to learn from the perspectives of everyone else who was there. And I have to say, reflecting on the importance of this topic, I think that when you see the level of engagement, you had the chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality personally participating, the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works with us for the entire morning, the administrator of NOAA, the president of the National Academy of Sciences. We in the trenches have been laboring on this issue for years and decades before that. And these folks have many other pressing topics on their agendas. The fact that they found the time and were there with us in person, I think, really reflects the leadership that Todd and the Corps have placed on this, and also the magic of this moment. The fact that the president has been so clear in his directives around this topic generally and specifically of how we can continue to improve the way that we make decisions around implementation and also formulation of projects. So we're absolutely thrilled, and I think it's going to take a long time for that thrill to wear off. But concurrent with all of that, the work continues.
Yeah, there was magic. I think that's maybe a good word. It's that time of year. But there was alignment, and this was referenced multiple times during the dialogue across all these participants, and the commentary and the input by participants was not scripted in any coordinated fashion, but they were all just gelling and integrating, and multiple times the alignment was referenced, and alignment at multiple levels across the federal government, across state, local, and federal government, between the public and the private sector, and the nonprofit sector, and the world of academia. And we had representation from all of those organizations. And there is just a very significant amount of alignment that is encouraging on one level, but is also challenging on another, because when you have alignment like that, you need to deliver. You need to take advantage of that alignment. And so that adds a seriousness to this. We have work to do in this project that the summit was a part of, and there's going to be work that will continue within the Army Corps of Engineers and across those organizations that are represented. We need to take advantage of the conditions that exist now.
There was sure a strong sense of that at the summit, that the time is now, the time for action. And it was pretty exciting. I was waiting for engineering with nature confetti to drop from the ceiling at the end. It was it's like, ta-da! It was great. We will absolutely make sure that we put summit materials in our podcast notes and make sure that they stay updated on the EWN website, because I know there's going to be a lot of things coming out from the summit. So let's talk about the work that you've been doing together. I guess from my perspective, the challenge of measuring the full benefit of engineering with nature approaches and measuring the value of including nature-based solutions in infrastructure projects, it's really been the holy grail for advancing these practices since we first started talking about engineering with nature in 2010. Todd, maybe you can talk about why measurement's so important.
Well, we've couched this in a number of different ways, but basically it's, how do we wrap our minds around the comprehensive or something approaching the full suite of benefits that nature-based solutions can bring to an infrastructure project. And first in that process is to recognize nature as providing value to such projects. And in doing that, we're looking for solutions for an approach to infrastructure development that is seeking harmony or partnering, or if you will, integration with nature rather than controlling nature. And getting nature up front in the process of planning and design involves elevating the benefits of nature. And what I mean by that is, moving consideration of those benefits forward in the project development process. It's critical to bring this understanding of the benefits of nature forward to the process of project design, to the whole idea of accepting nature as a part of the solution, of finding and identifying partners that could co-fund or finance these multi-purpose projects. There's a whole range of ways in which understanding value is important to this process of developing the kinds of projects that people desire, that communities are looking for, and at the same time informing those of us who are charged with delivering those projects, whether scientists or engineers, helping us organize around what elements to include in those projects. And as was noted several times during the event, there's really an urgency now to figure this out, to get this done. We, as Nicole LaBeouf from NOAA said at one point, we need to get this right as soon as possible.
Urgency. So Justin, talk about the work that you've been doing to measure what really matters. And let's put that challenge into context. Traditionally, how have benefits of infrastructure projects been measured?
Well, at the summit, we were, I think, really so fortunate to have retired General Jerry Galloway offer some historical perspective. Jerry joked that he's seen a lot of that history, and he surely has, but he went back, even further in time, going all the way back to the Flood Control Act of 1936. And I should say, as part of this work, we completed a historical review of the evolution of the Corps' authorities, as well as the manner in which projects have been reviewed and evaluated over time. And that is available on the EWN website. It goes into some significant detail. But General Galloway highlighted something that I think is so important. He went back to the Flood Control Act of 1936, and he pointed out that the language is very clear that it does call for examining benefits that accrue and looking at the costs of a particular solution as well. But in no way does it say that the benefits or costs should be exclusive to economics. In fact, he highlighted that the language speaks to the lives and social security of the people who are otherwise adversely affected by a particular project. And I think that was a very important insight because the premise of the Measuring What Matters Summit is that while we have done a very good job, and I think the Corps continues to do very thoughtful work in BCAs with a focus on economics, that was never an original requirement. And we trace that history back and forth in the 50s and 60s through the 70s, where it really lands in the early 80s. And as part of, I think, reflects the Reagan Revolution and the call towards the better stewardship of dollars that President Reagan is so well known for, that we really did hone in on the national economic determination. The challenge, of course, is that the science by which we evaluate and measure environmental benefits and social benefits, that has continued to mature, but has not, our processes and procedures have not perhaps kept pace with the science. And that, of course, is really what the focus of the summit and the several years of work that we've been doing with the EWN program has really been focused on. So I guess I'll close this comment by saying that, you can look back at history and see very clearly why we have arrived at the methodology and the challenge that we have before us. But going back to the earlier part of this conversation, you can also see how the stars are just so nicely aligned to take this whole practice and move it to its next logical step. And that's what we're certainly the most excited about.
Within this project, where we're focused on comprehensive benefits related to nature-based solutions, we do want to recognize that some of the benefits that nature-based solutions can provide can be monetized. That is, the outputs of including nature-based solutions can be measured in terms of dollars. And you do that basically as a way of keeping score, if you will, about the project, as you might relate it to other alternatives, if you will, or other conceptions of the project. But converting an output into dollars is not the only way to keep score, if you will, or to gauge the total value of a project. And in fact, some really important outputs can be difficult or maybe even inappropriate to monetize. And I reflect on one comment, one remark that Mr. Connor, our Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, made. He says, "We know we might not be able to value everything, but we should value what we can. And that is a part of the agenda moving forward." And I was particularly struck during some of the dialogue about this by a statement that was made by Lakeisha Hart, who directs state planning in Louisiana. And it was timely, and as I said, it was moving to me and I think a number of others at the summit, when she said, "A house is a house." And what she meant and what she explained is it's a house because people live there, not because of how much the house is worth on the market, right? That house is somebody's life and the people that live in it. And you can't summarize that house completely or comprehensively with a dollar symbol. So that's just one example, in regards to social effects and equity, but there are a whole range of other ways in which nature-based solutions contribute, including broadly environmentally, but also economically in terms of risk mitigation, whether you're talking about flooding or drought mitigation or a whole range of other ways that nature-based solutions can contribute in practical terms.
I thought that was just a brilliant way that Lakeisha had to help us understand the intrinsic value that you were talking about, the intrinsic value that can come from these projects. I think it's an important image to keep in our minds. Let's talk about the work that you've been doing. Justin, you and your team have been doing a very deep dive on this challenge of how to value, how to measure the benefits of nature and nature-based solutions.
We began with the historical review that I mentioned just a moment ago. We then went through a process of identifying 6 historical planning studies that considered, in one way or another, nature-based solutions as part of the alternatives evaluation. We then completed a review of a series of planning frameworks, evaluation methods that incorporate environmental and social benefits, and then went back and analyzed the 6 case studies that we highlighted. And we used these updated methods and sort of exploratory analyses to look beyond any kind of current policy constraints. That resulted in a series of findings and recommendations that we went through at the summit. And the one that I'll highlight is that at the end of the day, our primary recommendation isn't simply that we need a sharper scalpel, that we need to move from being able to say that a particular benefit cost ratio is really a 2.73 when it came out in the original way as a 2.55. Or to quote once again retired General Jerry Galloway, he oftentimes will say, "Stop trying to slice the bologna so thin." There comes a point where you simply can't slice it any thinner where you'll find meaning around it. So at the end of the day, I think our conclusion, and I'm happy to talk a little bit more in detail about some of our findings and recommendations, but at the highest of levels, when we talk about evaluating both the economics, environmental benefits, and social benefits, it's so important to go back to what Todd highlighted from Lakeisha Hart, that and what the summit was titled of measuring what matters. And at the end of the day, in order to really get this right, yes, there will need to be a difference in evaluation, but that's going to have to be carried all the way back and forward to the formulation process and the manner in which we think about this from the moment that a non-federal sponsor comes and knocks at the door. So yes, we can refine our numbers, and we should, but that's not simply the answer. It's not simply sharpening the scalpel. There's more to be done.
There are many forms of research. Some research in particle physics is done in an accelerator. Some research is done in a test tube. Some research is done in some large field experiment. What we've been doing is called policy research. And that's where you explore the implications of policy alternatives. And it's a very important area of research. And what we're understanding here, and what we're focused on here, is what and how we measure and incorporate understanding of benefits into the planning process is very important to the outcome of planning, and what projects are selected and what constitutes the project. And in this particular case, how we can incorporate nature more positively into infrastructure projects for the benefit of the project, so the project works better, lasts longer, doesn't cost as much money to maintain, but also in what it provides to the community where that project is embedded, where it lives and breathes.
So you basically have 5 big policy recommendations. I don't think we'll go through them all in detail because they're going to be in our show notes and on the Engineering with Nature website. But I would like you to both to talk about, from your perspective, what's the bottom line? How would you summarize the results of the work done on measurement and what the implications are for the Corps of Engineers.
Our number one and first recommendation is to use an integrative multi-objective approach to scope planning studies as well as ultimately to review them. And the reason that this is so important is that when formulating projects that include nature-based solutions, if folks at districts across the country understand and believe that the environmental and social benefits, that there's difficulty in quantifying them and they're not going to be appropriately considered in the ultimate review, either within the Corps of Engineers or at the Office of Management and Budget, then there's not an incentive to move forward with innovative work in the engineering with nature space. And so a multi-objective approach to scoping and a multi-criteria approach to evaluating, I think, is just so core and will entail things like ensuring that we're incorporating input from the non-federal sponsor the moment that he or she knocks on the door, because that will help to inform the objectives that a particular study is going to consider. It's also going to be critical that we consider the benefits across multiple mission areas, and that we do so not in a stovepipe fashion, but concurrently. And if we can do that, there are certainly a series of other recommendations that we have put forward, and happy to go into them. But Sarah, you're absolutely right that we'll go into great detail in our final report. But ultimately, I believe that at the end of the day, that bottom line is that by making very clear in the evaluation process that a holistic appreciation of a series of benefits and costs over and above economics, that really has the opportunity to transform. And we've got great science to support such a transformation. There certainly is a will, both a policy will and a drive from both the administration all the way across more agencies than just the Department of Defense. So I think there's a real opportunity to harness all of this interest and enthusiasm and see some big changes happen in the next 18 to 24 months.
Yeah, the rules, if you will, or the framework, the guidelines that you use to define what a relevant value or benefit is in the context of developing a project or planning a project, that informs very substantively, well, what constitutes a solution within that project. So back on Justin's point, even up to very early on in the process, how you formulate or put together alternative combinations of the measures that would constitute a project. A little bit of this and a little bit of that, we're going to put that together. That's alternative one. Okay. And a little bit of this and a little bit of that constitutes alternative two. And then we compare these alternatives to each other. And we do it by keeping score in regards to the benefits and the costs of those alternatives. So clearly in that kind of approach, which is planning generally understood, in that approach, what you recognize as a benefit basically determines everything that happens, in the study.
So by opening up that frame, you're really encouraging innovation. You're encouraging people to think about different ways, different solutions. It's really, really, it's forward thinking. It's transformational, as Justin said.
Yes.
Before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about what's ahead.
The work will just continue with this level of excitement and a pace, but we're turning our attention to, of course, at this point, completing our final report, and then turning our attention to really focus on social outcomes and equity. We plan to consider the same 6 case studies that the report has focused on these last couple of years, to consider social outcomes and equity And then equally as important, and to Todd's great credit, this has been emphasized throughout the process. We need to get, and we'll get very focused on the practical implementation, both guidance as well as decision support tools, so that building on all of this excitement and opportunities around new guidance, we always want to keep ourselves focused on the fact that so many of the key decisions get made at the district level. And we want to make sure that everyone in districts across the country are armed with implementable and practical guidance, so that, again, from the moment someone knocks on the door as a non-federal sponsor with an idea that includes, one or more alternatives that are integrated and include nature-based solutions, that folks at the district level understand from soup to nuts how to work with that non-federal sponsor to move these innovative ideas forward through the process in what is really a dynamic and exciting body of work right now.
Yeah, Sarah, you brought up the idea of innovation, which, because it's such a human process, it's exceedingly messy. Innovation is, but I was also struck by one of the remarks that was made by another local representative, and that was Dale Morris, who's the Chief Resilience Officer at the City of Charleston, South Carolina. He said, "We want a federal partner to innovate with us." So it brings up the whole idea of kind of partnership in innovation, which is really how you innovate effectively in a meaningful way. But there is a lot of change coming. And as Justin points out, to be able to kind of guide and focus within that change, you have to provide, tools. You have to organize the information. And you have to be deliberate in that process. And I would say in the context of, say, the Corps of Engineers and with our partners, we need to do some planned learning. We need to be intentional about the learning that we need to undertake, if you will, through effort to capture more benefits. And it's going to be an organic process of gaining experience in understanding a broader array of benefits that can be achieved through incorporating nature-based solutions into infrastructure projects, exercising those new approaches for capturing benefits to produce a broad array of economic, environmental, social benefits, and then sharing that experience and those learnings across the enterprise. And so together, say the Corps of Engineers and our non-federal sponsors and our stakeholders working together to innovate in this space, there's just huge potential for us in the future.
Absolutely. I really want to thank Justin for coming back to join us on the Engineering with Nature podcast. It sounds to me like the work that you've been doing with Todd and your colleagues is really getting us closer and closer to that holy grail of measurement. It's within reach. And to Todd's point, the stars are aligned. The time seems to be now significant progress on the integration of nature-based solutions into critical infrastructure projects. It's all possible now. And one of the things I heard at the summit was the time for action is now. We've got 10 years to make a difference. Very exciting times.
Absolutely. These are, when you do the kind of work that we're honored to do, you hunger for opportunities like this, where you can bring advanced science to bear to help inform decision making. And this is a once in a generation moment for us to refine the way we think, continue to innovate. And it's just such an honor on behalf of all my colleagues at the Water Institute to support Todd and the Engineering with Nature program. We're beyond thrilled with what's happened to date, and even more excited with what's to come.
Yeah, I would say beyond supporting the communities of this great country, because that's the reason why we're doing all this. We're doing this to produce projects that last, that produce the array of benefits that our communities need and deserve.
And I'll add that to Todd's point that, I think he's so right to emphasize the communities that are impacted. There was a great focus at the summit on the Justice 40 initiative and on questions around equity and environmental justice. And I would argue that there are very few policy challenges or opportunities that can move the needle as much as what we've just spent this time talking about. So again, our enthusiasm just couldn't be stronger and higher for all that's to come and the impact that can be made.
Well, thank you both for your incredible work. And it is bringing people together. It's bringing communities across the United States together. And hopefully we'll have listeners around the world tuning in and looking up the documentation from the summit. There's so much opportunity here to share. To all of you, thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast, and we hope you'll join us again when we talk about engineering with nature.
The EWN podcast was developed by Sarah Thorne and Jeff King, Deputy National Lead, Engineering with Nature Initiative, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. For more information, you can visit our website, engineeringwithnature.org. The EWN podcast is produced by Eye Contact Productions for the Engineering with Nature program within the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm Dave Trafford.